Who needed to sleep when you had animated animals solving crimes with paper-thin plots? Yes, I'm talking about the Saturday morning shows, the golden hours of our childhood. Let's not forget the laugh tracks, because apparently we needed help knowing when something was actually funny. Pretty classic stuff, right? Before TikTok stole all of our attention and Netflix kept asking if we were still there was something very magical about the 1970s called Saturday mornings. Back then, weekends weren't about various house jobs or endless scrolling, but they were about staying in pajamas, eating a big bowl of cereal, and watching the TV. Saturday mornings were filled with crazy cartoons and creepy live-action shows that had no logic but were so much fun. Superheroes, talking animals, silly adventures. You name it, it was there. Did the stories always make sense? Absolutely not. Did the characters break every rule of logic? Of course they did. But we didn't care. Parents sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, absolutely happy that you were quiet for a while, but probably wondering if our brains were turning into garbage. The best part was the feeling of sitting in front of the TV, laughing, and getting lost in the fun. Let's take a trip back to those mornings when life was pretty simple, a bowl of cereal was the best meal of the day, and cartoons ruled our world. A world where science meets magic, which is covered in the specific package of a 1970s Saturday morning sitcom. Big John, Little John burst into NBC in 1976, featuring Herbert Edelman as Dr. John Marshall, a 40-year-old middle school science teacher with a strange biological trick in television history. The show's wild assumptions? John accidentally drinks water from the legendary Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine, Florida, and suddenly discovers he can transform between his adult self and a 12-year-old version of himself. Big John, Little John was a short-lived American sitcom that aired on NBC from September 11th to December 4th, 1976, and it was created by Sherwood Schwartz and Bob Shane. Each episode became a comedic scene of a scientist trying to understand his own unexplainable condition while navigating the challenges of teaching middle school. One moment he's lecturing about chemical reactions, and the next he's experiencing them firsthand by shrinking into a preteen body. The series amazingly played with age-swap comedy before it became a Hollywood plot. John's scientific mind constantly battled his impressive ability, creating hilarious scenarios where he'd switch ages mid-sentence, confusing students, colleagues, and even himself. It's 1972, bell-bottoms fashion is all over the place, and someone at Filmation Animation Studio wakes up thinking, you know what the Brady Bunch needs? Less reality. The Brady Bunch was a major success, dominating regular TV shows. Sherwood Schwartz, the big boss who created the original show, thought, hey, why not milk this cash cow some more? But here's the twist. The real-life drama behind this cartoon was better than anything they actually animated. Barry Williams and Maureen McCormick were like, see ya, after the first season. Why? Money issues, of course. They got replaced quicker than Jan could say, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. But wait, it gets better. The show actually gave us some pretty wild scenes. Did you know this was the first time Wonder Woman appeared in the cartoon? She showed up in one episode, probably wondering what she did wrong to end up there. They even had Superman and Batman drop by. Talk about a crossover episode before crossovers were ever cool, right? The Partridge Family was a super hit American TV show that aired from 1970 to 1974 on ABC. It was about a musical family that was raised by a widowed mom, Shirley Partridge, and her 5 kids, including Keith and Lori. They formed a band, recorded songs in their garage, and went on tour on a bright, colorful old school bus. Their manager, Reuben Kincaid, helps them handle the ups and downs of showbiz. The show was inspired by a real-life family band, the Cowsills, but actors were cast instead because the real Cowsills weren't trained actors. Shirley Jones's role as mom was the attractive part of the show's success. While the show was amazing and fun, it also had its struggles. David Cassidy became a teen idol but felt trapped by his popularity. After the show ended, a writer named Roberta Tatum said that the idea was copied from her work. The lawsuit was settled out of court for $150,000. Despite these issues, The Partridge Family is still loved as a classic TV show. The Sylvester and Tweety Show is a classic animated television series that featured the iconic rivalry between Sylvester the Cat and Tweety Bird, characters created by the great Warner Bros. The show debuted as part of Saturday morning programs in the 1970s, running on CBS from 1976 to 1981. the longest running game of cat and bird in the past. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Sylvester was first seen in 1939 and Tweety showed up in 1942. That's correct, folks. This chase began before your grandparents had their first date. But hold on to your whiskers. Tweety was originally pink and male. Some executive was kind of like, a pink male bird? Not in my America. So they made him yellow and played up the cute baby bird angle. Pretty interesting stuff, right? The show is basically a highlight reel of failure, as Sylvester might be the most unsuccessful cat in cartoon history. But hey, at least he was consistent. The show kept running on CBS because apparently watching a cat fail spectacularly never got old. Let's talk about the show that hopped to networks more times than Bugs chomped on carrots. The Bugs Bunny show actually started in primetime. This wasn't even a kid's show at first. It aired Tuesday nights in 1960, probably confusing adults everywhere. Is this for us or for the kids? Why am I suddenly watching cartoons? The first 52 episodes were in black and white. And here's the cool part. Each episode had new animation that kind of connected the classic theatrical shorts. They essentially were doing the popular MCU style connecting of universes before it became popular. Eventually it moved to Saturday morning cartoons in 1962, and it became the leader of cartoons. ABC had it until 1973, then CBS was like, hey, our turn, and snatched it up. The show ran until 1980s, proving that some bunnies just don't know when to quit. Woody the Woodpecker is a popular cartoon bird that first appeared in 1940. Back then, he looked a bit crazy, like a wild bird with messy feathers and really big eyes. His wild look matched his personality because he loved causing trouble and making other characters super mad. People weren't too sure about his scruffy design, so over time the animators changed him to look cuter and a bit more friendlier. By the late 1940s, Woody looked so much more polished, but he is still a funny and mischievous personality. One thing everyone remembers about Woody is, of course, his laugh. It's loud, silly, and unforgettable, and once you hear it, you're never going to forget it. This laugh helped make him a big star during the golden age of cartoons, alongside other popular characters such as Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse. Here's the surprising fact. Woody the Woodpecker also has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He got his start in 1990, which means a cartoon bird was honored before some of the real-life celebrities you know today. This shows just how much people loved him and how important he's been in the world of entertainment. Ever wonder how a pink cat with no dialogue became one of the coolest characters in cartoon history? Here's the tea. The Pink Panther wasn't even supposed to be the star. He was curated for the opening credits of the Peter Sellers movies, but this cool cat was super popular, and they were like, hey, let's give this pink fellow his own show. The show bounced between NBC and ABC like a panther on a pogo stick. He spent 9 years on NBC, then ABC was like, hey, now it's our turn, and renamed it the all-new Pink Panther Show, because adding all new to anything makes it better, of course. Get this, most episodes had 0 lines of dialogue. They made a hit show where the main character never said a word. Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle is an animated television series that first aired in 1976, based on the popular character Tarzan, created by author Edgar Rice Burroughs. The show was a part of the large Tarzan franchise, which had been a cultural staple for decades through books, films, radio shows, and comic strips. This version of Tarzan was fancy, y'all. Complete sentences, perfect grammar, no chest beating. It's like they found Tarzan, and then they sent him to Oxford, and then put him back in the jungle. Even Jane would be like, who are you, and what have you done with my jungle man? The show was the first animated version of Tarzan, beating Disney to the punch by about 20 years. And instead of Phil Collins songs, we got informative messages and a monkey named Nekima, who probably wished Tarzan would stop being so proper all the damn time. Before Disney made talking chipmunks into rescue rangers, there was a certain collie running the original animal rescue service. This wasn't your regular Timmy fell down the well lassie story either. This lassie had a whole squad of animal friends helping her save the day. Think of the Avengers, but with fur and 4 legs. The show even started with a full movie-length pilot called Lassie and the Spirit of Thunder Mountain, because nothing says kids' entertainment like mysterious mountain spirits and a heroic dog. And get this, Lassie didn't just save humans, but she and her animal crew protected the whole park from dangers like forest fires, pollution, and probably squirrels who didn't recycle. Have you ever wondered what happens when Star Trek refused to die? This show is an animated science fiction series that aired from September 8th 1973 to October 12, 1974, following the success of the original Star Trek series, which had been canceled after 3 seasons in 1969. After the original series was canceled, fans were not having it. They wrote so many letters that Paramount was like, fine, we're gonna make it into a cartoon. And thus, Star Trek the Animated Series was born. And here's where it gets good. Leonard Nimoy, our beloved Spock, pulled the most logical power move ever. He said, I'm not doing this unless you bring back Nichelle Nichols and George Takei. The only original cast member who did not come back was Walter Koenig. Maybe they couldn't figure out how to animate that accent, but don't feel too bad. He got to write an episode instead. Set in the 25th century after everything's gone wrong with Earth, this show follows a group of people traveling in a big high-tech vehicle trying to help survivors. But here's the clever bit. All the characters were named after people from the Bible. But instead of saving animals, they were actually saving humanity with science. They even had a talking chimpanzee named Adam. Every episode had a moral lesson, because apparently even after civilization falls apart, kids still need to learn about being good and nurtured people. The funniest bit? They drove around in what looked like a super fancy RV, trying to fix the world's problem one episode at a time. It's like an optimistic view at the end of the world. Everything's destroyed, but hey, don't worry, we have a cool truck and a talking monkey. Have you ever thought about why Scooby and Shaggy run from monsters instead of fighting them? Here's a fun secret. Scooby-Doo was created because people thought other cartoons were too rough at the time. In 1969, when parents were worried about cartoon characters hitting each other, the smart folks at Hanna-Barbera came up with this brilliant idea to make a show about solving mysteries instead of fighting. Think about it. 4 teenagers and a talking dog who get scared of fake monsters and solve crimes by accident. No punching, no explosions, just lots of running away and eating lots of food. It's like they replaced all the violence with food instead. And guess what? This safe show was one of the biggest hits ever. Starting on CBS, Scooby-Doo ran until 1976, then switched to ABC until 1991. That's longer than most real dogs ever really live. And the best part, every single monster turned out to be some grumpy old man in the dark saying, "And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids." What if apes didn't just take over Earth, but also got fancy about it? That's what happened in this 1975 cartoon. Unlike the movies where apes rode horses and lived in simple houses, these apes drove cars, wore suits, watched TV, went to monkey movies, and probably had better smartphones than we do and would post on Ape Instagram. The show only lasted 1 season, and here's the creepy part. It was closer to the original book than the actual movies themselves. A world with apes, and here's the twist. While the live-action movies showed apes living like it was the Stone Age, these cartoon apes were living their best lives with all the latest gadgets. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took Gilligan's Island and turned it into a pretty cartoon? Add a talking monkey named Stubby, and you have this show exactly. Almost everyone from the original show came back to do the voiceovers except for Ginger and Mary Ann. And here's the twist. They couldn't use the famous theme song everyone knows and loves. It's like having a peanut butter sandwich without the peanut butter. Weird stuff, right? The show was aired for 2 whole seasons, and later they even made another version where they got stuck on a planet instead of an island. Apparently being stuck on an island wasn't enough. Being a teenage boy who can turn into a superhero by saying one word. Sounds really cool, right? Now imagine doing it in the 1970s with special effects that looked like they were made with paper clips and some rubber bands. That was Shazam, a live-action show that proved you didn't need fancy computer effects to be really good. And the best part, the show aired on Saturday mornings between cartoons. It's like having a real superhero show up between your bowl of cereal and your early morning cartoons. They even paired it with another show about a teacher who could turn into an Egyptian goddess because one person with magical powers was not enough for Saturday mornings. Ever had a teacher who you thought was cool? Well, was your teacher secretly an Egyptian goddess? Meet Andrea Thomas, a normal school teacher who could turn into Isis just by saying a magic spell. And here's the fun part. She would actually talk to kids watching the show. Right in the middle of saving the day, she'd look at the camera and give life advice. Talk about breaking the fourth wall. And since this show shared the same time with Shazam, sometimes they would even team up. Ever had a parent-teacher conference? Sorry I'm late, I was just busy saving the world with my teenage superhero. What happens when Dracula, Wolfman, and Frankenstein's monster decide to fight crime instead of actually causing it? That's the concept of Monster Squad. Think of it as Night at the Museum, but with classic movie monsters and way less budget. The story follows Walt, a student who works at a wax museum. One night, his computer brings all the monsters to life. But instead of causing chaos, these monsters decide to become superheroes. It's like the world's weirdest career change from scary movie star to fighter. The show only lasted 13 episodes, probably because even monsters have trouble paying rent in a wax museum, it seems. Have you ever been in a situation where you started to tell a story and got halfway through and then decided to tell a completely different story? That's exactly what happened with Jason of Star Command. The first season had tiny 15-minute episodes that were all connected, like reading one page of a book each week. Then in season 2, they suddenly switched to regular 30-minute episodes that didn't connect at all. The show is basically Star Wars on a budget, but they were instead a bunch of space adventures and special effects that looked like they were made in someone's garage. But hey, in the 1970s, if it had blinking lights and made beeping sounds, it was considered sci-fi. What if you had a regular school, but you put it in space on an asteroid and set it 1700 years in the future? That's Space Academy. The show was about super smart kids learning about space mysteries in the year 3732. The best part was that the head of the school was played by the same actor who was Dr. Smith in Lost in Space. So the guy who used to cause trouble in space was now in charge of teaching kids about it. They only made 15 episodes, but they kept showing them over and over. Nothing says Saturday morning quite like watching the same space school episodes over and over again. Our beloved cat and mouse duo, famous for their slapstick mayhem, suddenly forced to become, well, frenemies, who had to solve their differences in peaceful ways. Let's rewind a bit. Tom and Jerry weren't always these good versions of themselves. They started out as over-the-top theatrical superstars. These original shorts were masterpieces of violence. Tom getting flattened like a pancake, stretched like rubber, or even turned into an accordion. Pure cartoon gold. But then came the 1970s and ABC decided that maybe, just maybe, watching a cat get hit with a frying pan wasn't the best thing for kids because clearly children everywhere were trying to mail themselves to Abu Dhabi after watching too much Garfield. The result? A new version of Tom and Jerry that lasted exactly 16 episodes was aired. Apparently even the creators couldn't figure out how to make a cat chase a mouse without any humor. And here's the ironic twist. The original Tom and Jerry cartoons had little dialogue. This new peaceful version had practically huge peace talks. It's like watching two UN people trying to negotiate a cheesy treaty. Despite its short run, the show remains a fascinating example of how not to fix something that isn't broken, and what's the ultimate punchline? Well, today's kids can watch both versions and probably wonder why anyone thought a cartoon cat getting bonked on the head was such a big deal. The legacy of this experiment lives on as both a cautionary tale and a reminder that sometimes animated violence is just funny. After all, no cats were actually harmed in the making of Tom and Jerry, though Tom's dignity might have taken a few hits along the way. And there you have it, folks. All these are shows that made Saturday mornings worth waking up for in the 1970s, back when kids had to wait for their entertainment, and commercials were just as exciting as the shows themselves. Remember, these shows walked so that your 24/7 streaming services could actually run. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll dive into the classic shows that probably wouldn't be made today, for good reason. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because unlike these shows, we're still making new content. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.